The medieval world is usually considered like a dark era, full of terrible and bloody wars, murderous epidemics and diseases eradicating entire peoples. Not too well-developed medieval medicine and the absence hygiene in cities created ideal conditions for the spread of creepy and fatal diseases, many of which claimed millions of lives. So in this video, we will talk about 7, the most terrible and dangerous diseases of the past plague. It is one of the worst diseases in history of the Middle Ages. The plague pandemic, it has swept the whole world, to this day remains on the list of the most dangerous infections. And this is understandable, because this disease probably every inhabitant of Europe was afraid all that the plague left behind is depopulated cities, deserted villages, scattered farms, and abandoned cemetery, because no one then knew how to escape from this bacterial infection. The causative agents of this disease are carried by fleas who, in turn, became infected rodents Middle Ages. Massively living in cities, it comes in 2 main forms. Bubonic and pneumonic plague mortality from this disease in those days was 95% severe headache hallucinations, often nausea and vomiting, blood-swollen lymph glands reddened, and then blackened skin, heavy breathing, and rotting limbs. And these are just some of the signs of bubonic plague. In addition, there have been epidemics repeatedly. 3 of the most popular are listed. The first of the worst epidemics was Justinian in the Plague, covering the entire civilized world during the reign Byzantine Emperor Justinian I. The disease raged throughout 2 centuries, from 541 to 750th year after there was Black Death II in history plague pandemic, the consequences of which were catastrophic peak of the disease for 1346-1353 years, and repeated outbreaks continued until the 19th century. Plague killed tens of millions people, died from it, according to various sources from 30 to 60% of the European population. The third plague pandemic, and originated in China in Yunnan province in 1855, plague for decades extended to all inhabited continent, and only in China and India, the death toll was over 12 million. Some from all plague epidemics died, according to various sources. Approximately more than 200 million people. It is impossible to give exact numbers. Blackpox, smallpox, very tenacious, highly contagious. A viral infection is one of the most ancient on the planet. It is capable of kept frozen for many years, condition and survive at temperatures up to 100 degrees Celsius. The disease is considered the most widespread in stories after all. For centuries from smallpox, millions of people died in the medieval Europe. The virus has spread so much wide that it was impossible to meet a person not sick, but smallpox, the main symptom disease outbreak of a huge number of ulcers on the body which then transform into large scars provoking rotting of the body. Alive, other symptoms include pain and back fever, headache and vomiting. But that's not all. Even those who are still was able to survive this disease in the end, quite often lost their sight because of this diseases in Europe, have become widespread spread powder, white and rouge and thick layer of makeup, disguise about dorsal scars, the same vaccine from smallpox. Another was found in 1796 English physician Edward Gennaro. However, it took doctors almost 2 centuries to kill the entire population of the earth today to fight smallpox. There is a vaccine that is being made every person at birth. The last fact of infection. With this disease recorded October 26, 1977. Somali cities stamp up to this point. The disease has deprived lives from 300 million to 500 million people around the world. Spanish flu or Spaniard attacked humanity swiftly and suddenly. During from 1918 to 1919, more than 550 million people worldwide. The name of the disease comes from its place emergence of Spain. On the territory of this countries, the virus has infected more than 40% population, is the worst thing in this disease. The rate of damage in the disease generally passed without any symptoms, but if they were, then it's blue complexion pneumonia and bloody cough. In later stages, the virus caused inside the lung bleeding, resulting from the patient was choking on his own blood. Some patients died the next day after infection due to technical progress. Namely, thanks to trains by airship and high-speed ships, the disease spread across the planet very fast. In some countries, on public places were closed for a whole year, such as the school, church, theater courts, and movie. Among all infected deaths from Spanish flu, approximately 50 to 100 million. Cholera. Throughout its history, humanity suffered from cholera at 18th century, began to develop trade and passenger transportation. There has been a change in the climate. European colonial invasion Asia. This served as the spread epidemics of this disease to Europe from the bottom. 1817 to 1961 Europe has experienced 7 cholera pandemics. 3 of them was the deadliest and destroyed about 2 million man. Is an infectious disease, breeds in fresh water and gets into the small intestine, begins to secrete a toxin that causes severe diarrhea and vomiting. In the most severe course of the disease, dehydration is so fast that a person dies after a few hours after the onset of the first symptoms. Modern world cholera no longer represents such dangers as before, however still registers individual cases and even epidemic outbreaks in developing and poor countries. However, some experts express concerns that the global environmental degradation will soon lead to problems with clean water and in developed countries. Tif is an acute infectious disease transmitted from sick person to healthy through lice, characterized by a specific rash all over the body with fever and defeat. Nervous and cardiovascular systems in complication. There is a high risk of internal bleeding, including cerebral, as a result of which patients die. Disease until the 20th century was often companion warrior. The number of victims of this diseases often exceeded the losses in battles in post-revolutionary Russia in period between 1917 and 1921 from loose typhus killed about 3 million people in 1942. In the USSR, an effective vaccine against rash infection and almost completely defeat the disease succeeded with antibiotics. Currently, mostly typhoid fever is a disease with similar symptoms, but transmissible exclusively through food. Scurvy of the Middle Ages. Even beriberi could become fatal. Scurvy disease caused by an acute deficiency, vitamin C, has been found in times of the Crusades, early 13th centuries. Over time, it began to be called maritime score. But because basically sailors hurt her, for example, in 1495 ship Vasco da Gama lost over 100 out of 160 expedition members on their way to India. As 1600 to 1800 died of scurvy, about 1 million sailors, exceeds the human losses of sea battles. Of that time period of this disease, increased fragility of blood vessels in the body. Rash appears and increases bleeding gums and teeth falling out. There is also a decrease in immunity and the appearance of anemia for several centuries in a row. Scurvy was considered contagious disease and was not cured. But the cure for scurvy was found here in 1747. Chief doctor of the Maritime Hospital in the city of Gaspard in the UK. James Lind proved that greens and citrus fruits can prevent disease development. Leprosy, blind paradise, or as it is called in another way, leprosy is one of the most dark pages in the history of contagious diseases. Leprosy is considered one of the oldest diseases. The first mention of the disease is found in Bible papyrus Ebers, and also some writings of doctors of ancient India. However, the heyday of this disease fell on the Middle Ages. Then arose leper colonies, quarantine places for the infected. Such a leprosy. Leprosy is a chronic, infectious, long-term transmitted disease. Skin contact with a carrier of the infection or through saliva. The infection affects the skin cover, peripheral nervous system, respiratory tract, eyes. The hands and feet of the patient begins to rot alive when a man made him sick, exponentially buried. The patient put in the coffin was lowered into the grave and slightly sprinkled with earth. After this ritual, it is forever sent to the leper colony for his loved ones. He was considered dead after he isolated himself from society. Patients were often given a huge dark floors, it with a hood and a bell which was intended to alert around about what is approaching them. Lepers feared and hated them. In those weather times, miscalculated heavenly punishment for the gravest sins. The peak incidence of leprosy is in the period from the 12th to the 14th century. Then the center's infections have been reported in most European countries. Currently, leprosy is possible diagnosed at an early stage and completely cured, but at a late diagnosis, the patient becomes disabled with persistent, the most physical changes. Sad in medieval history, medicine can no doubt be called times of terrible outbreaks. Infectious diseases, at the time medicine was underdeveloped. Although there have been some measures are still being met today, echoes of dangerous diseases. Planet is changing rapidly, and we can't keep up, develop vaccines and drugs. There is no panacea for all diseases. Do some epidemics forever left in the past. But many still slowly but surely destroying humanity, and a certain amount of them and completely evolves. Confusing. Scientists, and adapting to modern antibiotics and vaccine if you like it. And want more, be sure to like these videos, subscribe to our channel, and click on bell so you don't miss new ones issues.